We often, as adults, will misremember some of our school experiences and we'll think, oh, school's really exciting and fun and intellectually developmental and I remember that one class that was so interesting and that one teacher that I just loved. And then they forget about the other classes and the many teachers that they didn't enjoy that with.
I have people in my family, they are teachers, and they're exhausted. It's a broken system.
And on top of that, they don't pay them anything.
Yeah, true.
So what in the world are these poor people supposed to do? I think teachers are so nervous that their jobs are going to be taken from them if they allow technology to go in, and nothing could be further from the truth. And if you go to one of the poorest schools in rural India, or you go to one of the most expensive, ritzy private schools in Connecticut, you're gonna see something very similar. You're gonna see a teacher leading a group of students in a time-based system. Now, the buildings are nicer in one spot versus the other, but nothing's really changed.
Currently, with the education system, what really frustrates you the most? When was the moment that you felt like, I have to do something?
Well, that came actually quite a bit later. I was also, this is how much I hated school growing up. I would actually speak to teachers and I'd say, wait, you chose to work at a school? Like this is the job you actually want to do?
Really?
Because I just couldn't imagine, why would anyone want to spend the rest of their life in school? And so I was pretty much done with education when I finished college. And I began my career doing other things. And then I got married and I had children. And it was interesting because when it was time for my girls to go to school, my husband and I sat down and said, okay, well, we were both products of public school education and we turned out fine. And so we'll go ahead and do the same thing with our kids. So I put my oldest daughter in our local public school, which is considered one of the very best in Texas, probably one of the top in the United States. And I quickly found myself just getting frustrated with the lack of ability for that system to be able to kind of personalize any sort of education for my girls. Lots of little things that would happen.
Example?
Well, here's an example. When my daughter came into kindergarten, she was already reading. And she would come home in the afternoon with worksheets that were like, A is for ant, B is for bat, C is for cat. And I would speak to the teacher and say, she's already reading chapter books. Can she be doing some work that's a little more challenging? And the teacher, as I completely can relate to, was like, I've got 22 kids in my classroom. I've got some kids who've never seen the alphabet before. So I have to get everybody sort of going at the same page. But I found that a little bit frustrating. I also remember when she was in second grade, her grandmother gave her a book on the American Revolution, and she got really interested in that and wanted to learn more. And so I went to the teacher and said, do you think she could do a research project on the American Revolution? And the teacher's response was, sorry, that's not part of our curriculum.
Wow.
And she can't do that at school. And I thought, well, there's all this time when she's kind of sitting quietly because she'll have finished her work. Could she maybe do that research, in that time? And the teacher just said, unfortunately, there's not really a way that that's built into our system. And it was interesting because I had a lot of my friends whose kids were also at the school. And I would say to them, like, aren't you frustrated by this? Doesn't this frustrate you? And they'd look at me and like, what do you mean? Our kids are doing great. And they were doing well in terms of being top of their class and being advanced. But it all sort of came to a head about halfway through that year when my daughter came home one day and she just said, Mom, I don't want to go to school tomorrow. I said, what do you mean? You love school. And she just looked at me and she said, school is so boring. And I had this realization, like, there's no way I can watch my girls spend 12 years of their life, the majority of their day, majority of their year, doing something that's going to just take that passion and enthusiasm out. I saw myself from when I was a kid, and I realized something has to change. And I knew it wasn't about just going from a public school to a private school. I knew it was the time-based system with one teacher trying to lead a group of kids who were all at very wildly different levels.
Yeah.
That was the issue. And so in 2014, another parent and myself, got together with what I look back as sort of the original founding families of Alpha. And we decided, let's take matters into our own hands and let's try something different.
I see. Okay, that was the moment. Yeah. And currently, with the education system, what really frustrates you the most?
You know, there's been learning science research, basically the science of how people best learn. For 40 years, universities like Oxford and Harvard and Stanford have known that there's all these different principles that can be incorporated that allow students to learn 2, 5, 10 times faster. And every single one of those research papers either starts or ends with, unfortunately, these principles cannot really be implemented in a traditional teacher in front of the classroom model. What we've seen is that the best way for a student to learn is in a one-to-one mastery-based tutoring experience. So think of Socrates tutoring Plato, who tutored Aristotle, who tutored Alexander the Great, who by the age of 22 had taken over, the known world. It was that type of learning experience, really going in depth with somebody being your guide through a learning journey. That's where students do well. But 250 years ago, with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, there was a big problem to solve, which is how do you educate the masses? It can't just be a tutor for only the wealthy. It's got to be, how are we going to educate everybody? And they also had a goal of creating work-ready people, right? People who knew how to be compliant, who knew how to follow direction, who knew how to stay in line and do what they were told. And that's really where the birth of the modern educational system came from. And if you look back from a couple hundred years ago to now, and if you go to one of the poorest schools in rural India, or you go to one of the most expensive ritzy private schools in Connecticut, you're going to see something very similar. You're going to see a teacher leading a group of students in a time-based system. Now, the buildings are nicer in one spot versus the other, but nothing's really changed. And when you think about how much has changed in so many different aspects of our world, except in education. Why is it that in education we've continued to just do the same thing over and over and try to say the same answers for how to fix it, which is, more teacher training, lower teacher-student ratios, more funding. Those things have been shown that they don't work. And I really feel for teachers in that model because they have been given a bucket with holes in it and told to empty the ocean, and it just can't be done. There's no way that a 6th grade teacher can figure out how to deliver 6th grade curriculum to a class full of kids, some of whom are at 3rd and 4th and 5th grade knowledge, some of whom are at 7th or 8th grade knowledge. There's just no way to do that. And it's part of what is so exciting about the time that we're living in now. With the invention of artificial intelligence, we can finally recreate that one-to-one mastery-based tutoring experience that changes the whole game for kids.
Yeah, I get it. Like, apart from that, what else do you find that it's broken in our system?
Well, it's unfortunate to say that I think there's so many things that are broken. The other part...
We have time, let's go on.
Well, in addition to the lack of academic rigor and development and performance that's being shown in the United States, there's only 1/3 of students are doing math or reading at grade level. And so it's really a bad situation. But on top of that, think about the fact that we spend all day trying to cram this information into students' heads ineffectively. And what we don't do is spend time preparing kids with what I consider the most important things that are needed to be successful in the world, life skills. Kids need to be learning things like socialization, which, any parent would say that's probably the most important thing that they send their kids to school for, is to get socialization. But you think about the way that the traditional system does it. They just throw kids in and say, good luck, I hope you figure out your place in the pecking order. I hope you learn how to handle things. There's not really time in the traditional system to teach life skills. Most life skills are taught in the after-school activities like sports, band or speech and debate team. Those after-school things, that's when a lot of kids are actually getting, lessons and coaching from someone to help develop them with life skills. And so what's happened is we see that we've got all these kids who are coming out of secondary school, and they're not well educated from an academic perspective. They don't have the skills that are needed to help them be successful and adapt. And most importantly, they haven't learned the skill of learning how to learn.
Oh.
Learning how to learn is such an important skill, especially in this day and age when all of the knowledge in the world is right there in our fingertips, and it's just a matter of figuring out how can you become an expert in anything you seek out to do. And I think we're seeing that a lot of kids are not prepared. The other thing that's, added complexity to this whole story is that our world today is the most quickly changing in history, right? There are so many jobs that haven't even been created yet.
Yeah.
This is no longer the time of our parents' generation where people would go to work at the same place for the next 30 years. They need to have that skill of learning how to become an expert at something new and being able to grab skills. When you think about the half-life of knowledge in this day and age is so much shorter.
What do you mean?
Like how long what you learn is going to be applicable. So let's pretend you're a computer science major at a college. It used to be that your 4-year computer science degree would last for, 10 years, 15 years. Now, with the advent of AI, information lasts like 6 months. So you constantly are having to figure out how to get up to date on the latest technology, the latest learnings, whatever it is that's going. How do you suddenly become, better? I'm sure you're even seeing this, like how do you stay on top of the latest algorithms for YouTube videos or Instagram? Like there's just so much changing. And so those are skills that kids need to be learning that they just don't have time to do in the traditional system. And then I also think fundamentally what it all comes down to as well is that school should be a place that helps to unlock kids' potential. And I believe that kids are limitless. There's so many things that they're capable of doing. And in our society as it stands, they're very underrated. And they're basically told just sit back and do what you're told to do and stay in your lane and, wait until you're older to really get into something else. It's like the example I gave of, we don't study the American Revolution, at this age, even though you're really interested in it. You need to wait until you're older, right? And I do believe that school should be a place that helps kids find their interests, their passions. What are they good at? What do they love to go and develop and explore? That should be something to do. And in this time-based school system that is existing across most of the world, it's just not built for helping to unlock potential. And it's something we have to change.
So what you're saying, on one side, the current system of like one to many, it's not working. Also, the kids, they are not getting the life skills that they need in order to succeed in life, and also we are not helping them to unlock their potential, right? Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Like everything is changing so much and so fast. Why is education not changing? Because I think it's at the core of our society. It's what is going to build the future. Not just like, the future humans and people and in the world. Why is not changing?
Yeah. Well, I think that, as you just said, education is at the core of what helps us create human potential. Yeah. All of the problems in the world can be worked on when somebody is educated well. But I think there's a few reasons that it hasn't changed yet and people have been slow to do it. First of all, education is such a personal experience that everybody had their own history with. And often what we see is that people think, I was educated a certain way and I turned out okay. So what's fine for me, is fine for my kid. And especially what we find with parents, they crave the familiar. They like knowing that, my kid is having the same experience I was having. And I also think that we often, as adults, will misremember some of our school experiences, and we'll think, oh, you know, school's really exciting and fun and intellectually developmental, and you know, I remember that one class that was so interesting and that one teacher that I just loved. And then they forget about the other classes and the many teachers that they didn't enjoy that with. And so I think that it's been one of those things where it's like, this is just, you know, the way it is. But the other big thing that we have to just understand is there hasn't been a good answer up until now for how to change it, right? When you do want to figure out, okay, how do we educate the masses? There hasn't been another way, and it's only been in a recent couple of years that we've really seen where technology could be helpful. And here's the other thing that's interesting. EdTech for the last 15 years has been around, and it's often been touted as this thing that's going to go in and change education, and it never has. And here's the reason for that. You cannot just hand a kid a computer and say, here, go ahead and learn, let me know when you've graduated high school, you know, I'll be out there. It doesn't work. Kids may not engage in it. They may not even look at the computer, or they do what we actually call anti-pattern learning, where they maybe don't fully read the explanation before they randomly guess, or they skip something, or they'll do what we call topic shopping. They'll say, I'm going to work on this little concept for a little bit, but as soon as it gets hard, I'm going to bag out of that and I'm not going to do this. So it's never been worked. It has never worked before. I believe the reason that Alpha School has gotten so much attention, and the reason we've got so many incredible results, real results that show our kids are crushing their academics, is because we have tackled the real elephant in the room, which is that 90% of what creates a great learner is being a motivated student. If you're not motivated, then the best ed tech in the world isn't going to help you. If you're not motivated, the best teacher in the world, the most incredible subject matter expert, isn't going to be able to help. And we have taken that as our huge focus within our school models, is how do we make sure that every student feels motivated to take on hard things and to perform at the best level that they are capable of.
Yeah, well, do you have any data that supports like what you're saying, and to help us understand what is really the size of the problem?
Well, I don't have, I mean, if you look at the data around the size of the problem, right, as I had mentioned, a third of students in the United States are able to do reading or math at grade level.
That's
and
a big one.
That has only gotten worse since COVID hit. And everybody thought that, you know, after COVID we would catch up. And the problem is that the problem has only gotten worse. And the reason for that is because when students miss foundational concepts, it makes it very difficult to learn more sophisticated concepts. That's why oftentimes people will struggle as they go on further and further. Great example of that. Starting in third grade, you're no longer learning to read, you're now reading to learn. And so if you're not a strong reader by third grade, you're going to struggle on learning more academics after that point, right? And in fact, you know, they've shown research that, you know, if you're a C student, a C grade student in third grade, your probability of being a C-rated student as a high school student is, you know, like 70+%. You're less likely to graduate on time. You're less likely to go to a four-year university. All of that is determined by the time you're a third grader. We're taking 9-year-olds and basically saying, this is what it is. Yeah, and the reason for that is because if you don't have strong addition and subtraction, and you don't have great fast math skills on your multiplication division tables, then you know what? It gets really hard to know fractions. And if you're shaky on your fractions, how are you going to learn algebra? And the worst time to be learning algebra is during your chemistry course, right? And so it just makes sense that when people build these towers of knowledge and they've got so many holes and gaps, that's a very, very shaky tower. And that's where we see trouble. And there's no way for a teacher to be able to take a group of students and say, let's go back and fill all these holes that you have. When you get a classroom of fourth grade students, many of whom are at first, second, third grade level, there's just no way a teacher in a time-based classroom is able to say, hey, let's stop and go fill in holes and also get fourth grade curriculum taught at the same time. And so it is a huge problem when you think about that.
Oh, so what you're saying, even like, what you're saying is like the first 4 years, they're very important for the foundation of the kid. And they need to learn things like, how to divide,
reading basic math, all of those things.
Basic math. And if that doesn't happen, then they will have trouble in the future, as there's research, right?
Absolutely.
That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. There's a lot of information that shows that. And the other thing that we're seeing is that if you look at high school, for example, in the United States, you know, if you're a 50th percentile student in 9th grade, the amount that you go up in basically learning in math over 4 years is like 2 points. I mean, you basically learn nothing. And in the United States, about half of our students that we graduate know as much math as a 99th percentile 3rd grader.
Wow.
Right? So it just gets worse and worse. If you don't start with that strong foundation, or if you start having gaps anywhere between. And I don't know what you were like, but I'll tell you what I was like. I had been one of those kids who was fine at math. I got A's in my grades. But then starting in about 9th grade, when I started getting into higher level math, I went off what I call the math cliff, where it was just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't understand these concepts. I don't understand. Well, what it really showed, looking back, is that I didn't have a strong foundational understanding of more basic math concepts. So then when I was trying to do more advanced things, it was very hard. And we had a great example of this. We had a student who came into Alpha School last year as a junior in high school. And junior year is when students take the SAT to get prepared for college and help with admissions. Well, she got a 720 out of 800 on her math portion of her SAT. 720 on this. But she just couldn't figure out how to get higher than that. And she wants to get higher because she was interested in applying to some very academically, intense schools and selective schools. And what I think would have happened in a traditional environment is a teacher or a tutor would have said, you know what, just keep taking more practice tests, just continue practicing more SAT math problems and get there. What we were able to do instead was, through our AI tutor, we were able to go in and assess that she was making silly mistakes under this kind of time crunch testing situation of the SAT with some basic math skills. And so what she did was she went and spent a couple of weeks going back to 3rd grade math, doing the things like, what's 7 times 6? What's 8 times 9? What's 3 times 4? Those types of questions. She went to sit for the next SAT and she went up to a 790 in her math score. And that was all by going back to basics, not trying to continue practicing, these hard problems. And the other thing that's beautiful about that is she was a student who came in saying, I'm not a math person. I can't do math. I don't know how to do math. And I will tell you, there is a lot of learning science research, and nothing anywhere says girls are not good at math. Girls can't be good at math. There's no information that says that. And unfortunately, this is something that so often kids put these identities on themselves and say, I'm just not good at this. I can't do math. And that's not true. What that really is showing is that kids just haven't been given the proper level and pace of learning that they need, because I believe anybody can be capable. And so when you look at the results that we have, our classes are top 1% in all grade levels, all subjects. And the reason for that isn't because we only let in kids who are already doing well. It's because we're able to meet them at exactly the level that they need to be met and allow them to go at the pace. And so the really impressive thing, when you look at, we publish our learning results, every year, because I think that's important for people who are looking at a new model to be able to see. And the thing that's really impressive, in addition to the fact that our classes are top 1%, is when you look at the growth rates of these students, that even kids who are already 99th percentile can be growing in the 90s. That's what's amazing. And you can take those kids who are, come in under 50th percentile, see their growth rates matching. And that's what our world needs. We have the ability now, through technology, to meet students where they're at. And if we combine that with the motivation piece, that's critical. But that's one of the things you said is why have we been hesitant to change? I think teachers are so nervous that their jobs are going to be taken from them if they allow technology to go in, and nothing could be further from the truth. However, the reason we have been so successful is because we've transformed the role of teachers so that instead of having to spend their time, creating lesson plans and delivering lectures and grading homework, our teachers are guiding students and they are focused on that motivation and emotional connection, helping to get to know students and helping them to really be successful, which, by the way, is what I think almost every educator gets into this field to do. They want to make that positive impact. And what's really beautiful about what I think is going to happen in the next 10 years, what we're going to see, is that these adults who are heroes working in the classroom every day are going to be given a lot more ability to make that impact than they have been in this broken model.
I totally resonate. I have people in my family, they are teachers, and they're exhausted. They are exhausted. They are actually they are not motivated. I see, because I think it's a broken system, and I love the analogy that you said. It's like a bucket of water full of holes, and they are holding it. So also for the teachers is really bad.
And on top of that, they don't pay them anything.
Yeah, true.
So they're not making any money. So what in the world are these poor people supposed to do? They come in with a desire to help young people, and they're just given so much work in an impossible task, and on top of it said, and we're not going to really value your work in terms of the amount of money that you're going to get for it.
Yeah, and help us to understand, today, with the current system that we have, what are the kind of students that we are preparing? What are what happens with the students when they go to one, they are not motivated, as you said, they are not motivated to learn. Then they are not prepared for what's coming next. What are the consequences of that in our society?
Well, I think that we're already seeing a breakdown in mental health.
Yes, true.
I mean, that's a huge challenge. We're seeing challenges in our economy. We're seeing a lack of ability for employers to find people that are going to be successful and help them. They're very used to a certain way. I think there's a lot of things that have happened from a social and cultural perspective where kids haven't been given a lot of opportunity to practice failing, to be challenged, to do things like learn how to receive and give feedback, to learn how to be adaptable, and that shows up with workplace issues where these people just aren't prepared, for that. And those are all things that you have to build up those muscles. You have to practice those muscles. I have a friend who told me that an employee that she was working with had come in complaining about her advisor and said, I had a meeting with my boss, and my boss was very, rude to me and said a lot of negative things. And she continued to explain what had happened. And at a certain point, my friend said, wait, wasn't this your performance review? And she said, well, yeah, isn't that awful? It's terrible. And it's like, you can't even learn how to take feedback, for work. And, I think that when you think about the population of students that we're trying to prepare into this world, and you think about the kids who are doing well, which is getting to be fewer and fewer, those kids have been put on a very rigorous, but rigid kind of conveyor belt of what they're supposed to do that really hasn't helped them become passionate and engaged. They're just told, this is what we should do. I was speaking with an admissions counselor at a very prestigious university, and they said, these students that are coming to us, they're not well prepared to do well in this environment, even though they were straight A students and did well on their SATs or whatever. And they also all look the same, right? They're all doing the same kind of thing to get ahead. That's not necessarily related to their interests or what they want to do. And then think about the vast number of kids that are struggling and failing in the system by all accounts. How are those kids going to be prepared to be successful? And it is the biggest crisis of our our world is how do we make sure we educate people well, because fundamentally we have to make sure that people have knowledge in their brains upon which to draw from, so that they can be great critical thinkers, so that they can be creative, so that they can collaborate and communicate with others. And if we don't solve that problem, none of the other world problems are really going to get fixed. And it's why I think that education is so important. But I will tell you as well, I don't think there's been a better, more exciting time to be a 5-year-old in this world.
True.
Because AI is finally going to be that tool that comes in and allows us to transform and revolutionize education. So the future of education, it is very bright.
Okay. Just when we were talking about it, I was just remembering it. It happened exactly with me when I was in college. I really hated. And I was questioning now why I hated it. And I was not motivated to come to school. I think I was not playing to my strengths. I was not aware about my strengths. And also I was pushed to just memorize a lot of stuff. And when we see that the system didn't change since like many years, and today, I mean, as you said, like there's no need to memorize, but what we need is life skills. What we need is to help kids to critical thinking, right? And that's what you say, there's a big lack in terms of in the education, right?
There absolutely is. And I will say I disagree with you in this. I do think that there is a huge role that things like memorization plays, like knowing your basic math, knowing some history information, that's important. Now, is it important enough to make kids spend 8 hours of their day, hours of homework to try to memorize something that they forget as soon as the test is over? Probably not. But what we've found is that it's possible now to not just get academics done, but crush academics in only a couple of hours a day. So our students are able to do their academics in 2 hours a day, and that gives them back their most valuable resource, which is time, to go and do the other things, that places that help them build those life skills and develop their passions and interests. So I believe the answer is we can have the best of both worlds. And as a parent, once I realized that my kid didn't have to sit in school all day in order to try to learn this, I felt like it was wrong to make them do so. And so I think that's the thing that's really making our model so compelling to people, is they're like, wow, I'm giving my child back all of this time to do big things. And you mentioned hating school. Our number one commitment that we make to our students in our schools is that they will love school. Because when you love school, it allows us to help our students do hard things, take on big challenges. They feel the support and they feel the community that they have, that they're excited to go to school. And when we say love school, it doesn't mean that every day is like Disneyland. There are days that are hard. There are days where kids have tried something that was scary. A kindergartner who's attempting to do a 40-foot rock wall, climb up to that can be scary. But the fact that that child is being cheered on by her classmates, and she's got guides who are supporting her and helping her to learn growth mindset strategies. When she gets in the car at the end of the school day, she can truly look at her parents and be like, I love school, right? Even when it's hard. And those are the things we have to let kids do. I truly believe that the key to a child's happiness is being held to high standards. The important part of that is not just the high standards, they also have to have the high level of support to make them successful. And that's actually the secret to creating a motivated person, is when I say to you, Rodrigo, I know that you are capable of making this podcast, the biggest podcast in the world, and I'm going to help you do that. That's where kids come alive, when they feel that. And in our system, our adults, our teachers, have the time to provide that high level of support to kids to help them do these big things. And so love of school opens up so many other opportunities. And I think that concept, when we say that, you're like, well, yeah, sure, kids should love school. But that's not how historically school has been treated.
Yeah.
School has been more like spinach. People are like, you know, you may not love it, but it's good for you. I promise it's good for you.
Yeah.
You know, at some point you'll appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, it's this. And I'm like, you know what? Why school doesn't have to be spinach. School should be the yummiest, tastiest, and most nutritious thing in the world for you.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it. So what you say is like you, they are, you help them to be at high standards, but then they have all the support to be in that journey to reach there, right?
Yeah.
That's what you say. And help me understand then how in your model is it possible that kids, they spend only 2 hours in school and are able to top like the 1% of in education?
So when we get to the nitty gritty of how our system works, our students are, you know, at school for the whole day, but it's the morning period, 2-hour time frame, when they're focused on their core academics. So
what are the core academics?
So when a student sits down to do core academics, they'll start with math, science, reading, and language. We incorporate eventually, you know, history and current events through a lot of reading comprehension. And by the time kids are done with high school, they've taken all the same types of curriculum classes that kids in traditional schools are learning. The difference is we have students spend these short bursts of about 25 minutes in each subject. When they start their work, they log into a computer, they go to a dashboard. The AI tutor has already been able to assess what the student knows and what they don't know through map assessments is what we do. There's lots of different ways we can assess where kids are at, and then it creates the learning plan that they need in order to be successful. So let's say you're a third grader who sits down, comes into our school, and they've said, okay, you're at, you know, halfway through second grade knowledge in math, you're missing these concepts. At third grade, you're actually a really good reader. You're reading at beyond a third grade level. It then creates lesson plans that provide curriculum that meets them where they need. It allows us to keep kids in what we call the zone of proximal development, where lessons aren't too hard that kids get overwhelmed and frustrated, and they're not too easy that kids are not engaged because they're just kind of going through the motions. So basically what we find is that 80 to 85% accuracy is that zone of proximal development that allows kids to learn at the right pace.
Oh, I see.
So they'll spend 25 minutes in a subject, then they take a recess break, which, by the way, kids need time to be physical and just play and hang out with each other, right? So they'll take a break, then they sit down for the next core block, take another break, next core block, take another break. And so basically by lunchtime, our students have finished all of their academic work for the school day. We don't have homework in our model because kids know what they've got to get. Yeah, they know what they've got to get done.
Cool.
And so they're able to hit their goals during that 2-hour period. And then they go to lunch, and after lunch, that's when the real fun begins. That's when we start working on these project-based group workshop experiences. And so that's things like, you know, kids running a food truck together and building a business, or kids participating in training for a Spartan race, where it's a teamwork workshop where the goal is that all of the kids in the class will finish the Spartan race at the same time. And think about how much you learn from something like that.
Exactly.
You learn how the weakest person in your group is the one that everyone else has to work with, right? How to be a leader, how to communicate, how to uplift others. And during those types of workshop experiences, that's when our guides are able to help develop all of those skills. Here's something we do that's really fun. We're also always using AI tools to help us in delivering these life skills. And so, for example, we have a workshop where kids are learning about teamwork and uplifting others and communication. And what we do is we teach them a lot of these different skills, and then at the end of the 6-week workshop, we have a test for how they've done on that. Like, how do you know if they've learned uplifting language and better communication? So we put the kids in an escape room. Have you ever done an escape room? Yeah. So the kids are in an escape room, and we mic them up.
Just say what is escape room? Maybe
oh yes, an escape room is one of these like puzzles, logic puzzles, where a group of people will go in a room and they have to like basically solve a mystery or figure out logic puzzles to go to the next room or do whatever. And they're actually a lot of fun. I really enjoy escape rooms. and we mic the kids up, and then we use an AI tool to analyze if they delivered more than 85% was considered positive, uplifting language. And think about it, you take a group
during
of...
during
the exercise, yeah.
During the exercise,
and so if you think
really?
about it, let's say you and I went into an escape room, you know, maybe I'm working on a puzzle and you might say, Mackenzie, let me do that. You can't do that, right?
I see.
Or I might say, we're never going to get out of here. This isn't going to work. We can't solve this. Well, instead what we're doing is we're teaching our students how to work effectively together, how to communicate effectively, and then we're actually able to analyze, were they more successful at communicating effectively than they were at the beginning? And the way we've actually measured that, we just did a workshop that ended up a month or so ago, but this group of kids, they'd gone into an escape room at the beginning of the workshop, and they'd gotten like a 32% positivity rating from the AI tool for their communication.
What does that mean?
Only 32% of their words that they said to each other were considered positive, like uplifting, helpful, you know, communicative, all of that. At the end of the 6-week workshop, they'd gone up to like 78%. Now, they still didn't hit, we were wanting to get up to like 85%, but they were better. And so there's all these ways that you can help kids learn these life skills, and most importantly, you can do it in such a fun way that the kids are excited about what they're going to do. I'll give you another example that combines the idea of high standards with helping a kid find their passion and interests, and providing the support to do that. We have a student who, as a 3rd grader, she loves making jewelry. So she was making little charm bracelets and things like that. And one of the things that kids have to do in our school is they have a lot of different kind of entrepreneurship challenges that they have to do. And one of them is that you have to be able to make $500 in profit from a business that you create.
How old? From how old?
She's 8 years old at this point.
Really?
So an 8-year-old having to do this. And you might say, gosh, that seems really hard to do. Well, we say, here's how, you know, you're going to be able to think of something you're interested in. She likes the idea of making jewelry. She started selling bracelets. She was learning financial literacy, and she was learning things like, how should she price her bracelets? Was she working on more volume? Where would she find customers? All that. Well, this student succeeded. She hit her $500 goal of profit. So the next challenge that she had at school is that she then had to raise $1,000 from non-family friend investors to reinvest into her business. So as part of that, she needed to come up with a business plan. What was she going to do with this $1,000? How was she going to go raise the money? Well, it was really interesting because her mom said her daughter came home one day and said, okay, I have this new challenge. Now I have to raise $1,000 to reinvest in my business. And the mom's going, oh my gosh, how are you going to do this? You're 8 years old. How are you possibly going to do this? And you know what the little girl said? She looked at her mom and said, Mom, I got this. I know that I can do this.
Wow.
And I know that I have the support that I need at school to help me do this. And so, for example, she learned that creating a business plan, you know, sitting down and understanding that there's certain components you put in a business plan. She learned how to use some AI tools to help provide her with that structure and that knowledge. She came up with a business plan that said she was going to do a few things. She was going to invest in better materials. She was going to take a jewelry making class, and she was going to open an online store that would help expand her business. And so she came up with those ideas. Well, then she's got to actually go out and find people to ask for money. You know, asking for investors is really hard, right?
Exactly.
And you know what you have to get used to is rejection, right? You have to learn that. So she would have conversations. She would present her business plan. Some people would say no. All right, you have to understand, you got to move on to the next person. Well, she eventually was able to raise her $1,000. As a 3rd grader, she could do this. And that same student, I just saw her a couple weeks ago on a Saturday, and she is now a 5th grader. And I said, how's your weekend been? And she said, oh, I was at a local market in Austin this morning. She said, I made $250 in profit from one day's worth of sales at a market. And she's got a thriving jewelry business now that she's been developing for the last couple of years, and watching that kind of grow. But that takes, you know, her guides having time to work with her on this, her parents believing that, wow, she is capable and it is possible to do this, and helping her find that interest. And I will tell you, just as often what can happen is a kid might try something. Maybe they start a business selling slime, and then they realize, you know what, I guess that's not what I'm interested in. I want to focus on something else. But again, that's what school should be. It should be a place and a time when kids get to try lots of different things, where they get to figure out what they're good at. Here's what I'm not good at. Wow, I learned that. Or if they find something that they're interested in doing, they shouldn't be told, you have to wait. We have another student who got interested in cancer because her grandfather died of cancer when she was in high school at about 15 years old. She's like, why is it that people get cancer, and what are the causes, and is this something? And I think in a traditional school environment, somebody would have said to her, well, if you're interested in cancer, you should become a doctor. You know, maybe eventually you'll go to medical school. And, you know, she'd say, okay, I guess I got to do well in science classes and math classes so that I can eventually go to medical school. Instead, at Alpha, what we said to her was, okay, why don't you start learning and researching everything you can. Start building a brain lift that tells you all the information that you're learning. She then opened an X account and started following experts in the field, you know, who were learning about this stuff. And then she would kind of translate. She'd read medical journal articles that she struggled to even understand, but she'd say, let me put that into ChatGPT and say, explain this to me like I were a 16-year-old, which, by the way, she was a 16-year-old. And then she would go on X and explain, you know, there was a research article that came out that talks about you know, the potential environmental connection that certain types of cancer can have or whatever. Anyways, ultimately what she started doing was following down a research path of epigenetics and that connection with cancer. What ultimately happened over a period of about 9 months was she created a documentary where she learned the skills of research, interviewing, developing a storyline, camera work, editing, marketing. And because she had built up an audience on X over time, when she released that documentary, in the first 48 hours, she had over 2 million views. That documentary now, in a year and a half, is at about 6 million views. She has spoken in front of US Congress and Senate. She's had laws changed in multiple states around the country. She's been interviewed by countless publications, and she was not told, you got to wait until you're older and you've got your medical degree to do anything. She was able to start making a difference right away, and that was all because she was given the time, the space, and the support to dive into an interest that she had right away.
Yeah, wow, that is so good. Yeah, it doesn't matter what they do. I think the journey that they go through to figure out things, to you know, and to learn about themselves is so precious. Like after, you know, when they are adults, that becomes natural. Those are the skills that they need that they are adult, and they are learning here in a safe environment, you know, exploring and learning by doing.
Yeah, and
that's exactly.
And that's the reason I think that we call our teachers guides, is because our guides help guide students along the journey. There are so many things that you or I could say, okay, we want to tackle this problem. We have no idea how to do it, but what we can do is develop the playbook based on let's just put one foot in front of the other, and let's get expertise and support and mentorship where needed to go figure these things out together. And I think that's something that you know, I'm really proud of that skill we're developing in our students. And we have a graduate of our Alpha school who, as a freshman at Stanford University, she was taking a math course, and the professor was known to be a bad professor. And the professor had such a strong accent that nobody in the class could even understand what she was saying. And our student said, you know what, that's fine. I can use a Math Academy app to learn the same subject. At the end of the quarter, she had the highest grade in the class. Wow. And her classmates would say, well, I didn't learn anything because the professor was so bad. And she looked at that as like, it's not the professor's responsibility to make sure that I learn. If she's not able to help me do that, I can go and learn that on my own. And that right there is what we want kids to be, self-driven learners who know how to go learn.
Yeah, no, help me to understand, does that model of 2 hours a day of learning and the rest for exploration or workshops, as you said, is it from first grade till the 12th grade, or is it just for a particular time?
No, so we have started actually as low as pre-K. We have kids starting at 4 years old. And by the way, those children are only doing like 15 minutes of time in adaptive apps. And that's already enough to help them kind of really start a great learning journey in terms of reading and math. And it goes all the way through their senior year of high school. And so this can work really for all age groups is what we've found.
Okay, so it can be for all age groups. So your school is kids there till which grade?
Till 12th grade.
Till 12th grade.
And my own two daughters are perfect examples of this. We started the school when my girls were in 3rd and 1st grade.
Yeah.
And my oldest daughter graduated from the high school a couple years ago. And my younger daughter is a senior in high school now. So she's going through the college application process. And at the end of this year, I'll no longer have any alpha children of my own. But what's really exciting is that, this all started just as a better way to help my own 2 girls. And now we've got thousands of kids, around the country that are being helped, which is really exciting.
It's so good.
It's turned into something bigger.
You were thinking of something bigger, and now I think you are into something really big.
I think that is going to be the case because what I've found really also exciting about what we're doing is I think, there's a reason we're kind of the most talked about school in the world. We've been able to be an example for administrators and government officials and teachers and parents all over the world to say, you know what, it is possible to flip this model of education. And it was really great. I actually just got a DM from a mom who lives in another state that doesn't even have an alpha school in it, and she homeschools her kids, and she says, I've modeled all these things after alpha. She said, we have their family name bucks because we pay our students alpha bucks. So she's created her own financial currency as a motivation model for her kids. She's created her own check charts, which are a bunch of individual challenges that students have to go through. Things like our students need to know how to change a tire on a car. They need to be able to solve a Rubik's Cube. They need to be able to learn a song on a musical instrument, things like that. And I just love the fact that we're helping other people come up with creative ideas and ways that they can say, hey, here's things we can do and implement. And also seeing that AI is not this scary dystopian, thing that's going to take the human interaction out of school. What we believe is that artificial intelligence is allowing us to raise human intelligence and human connection, because students in our schools get so much more opportunity and time to interact with each other and with their guides than kids in traditional classes do.
Yeah, I want to talk about AI, but before, there's something that I found really fascinating. You used 2 words. One was the AI mentors, and you mentioned that there's no teachers, there's guides, right?
Yes.
So let's understand what's the role of a guide in your school.
Our guides in our school are really meant to come alongside students and help them on their journey to become self-driven learners. So as part of that, they are providing motivational support to understand what gets a kid excited about putting in the work to learn. They're emotionally connected to the student in order to understand what are their interests, what do they like to do when they are challenged, what do they say to themselves, and how can we help them come up with more useful tools. So these guides have time to get to know. They are not teaching academic subject matter.
No?
So you're not gonna,
that's my question. No?
You're not gonna walk into one of our schools and see one of our guides teaching a student math. Instead, our AI tutor and our adaptive apps are the ones teaching the math to a student.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So our guides are only focused on supporting a student to learn how to learn.
Okay, then now help me to understand how do kids learn the academic through an AI tutor.
Yeah. So the AI tutor has created the lesson plan that a student needs that meets them where they're at and knows here's what you already know, here's what you need to work on, and so let's give you problems that do that. So let's say you're doing math, for example. A student will go to an adaptive app. It could be an app that we have built, that Alpha has built, or it could be a third-party app. Maybe they're going to Math Academy, which is an app that we absolutely love. That's a third-party app, or maybe they're using our Alpha Math program. It just depends on that. So they will, get a problem, they'll read an explanation, they'll watch a video explaining this problem, they'll answer the question, and they'll be working in their math journal to be able to answer it. If they get the problem right, then they move on to the next problem and they're able to go forward. But let's say they get the problem wrong. Then what happens is there's an explanation or another video that a child can look at or read in order to understand the problem. They might need that explanation, and then they get to try the problem again. Now, let's say that a student skips reading that explanation, just tries to guess. The AI tutor is able to notice that and says, you know what, hey, Rodrigo, we notice you're not taking time to read the explanation before you answer the problem. So, you'll be able to, if you take time to focus on reading the question or watching this video explanation, or let's say the kid has watched this one video explanation and it still doesn't make sense, then there's a resource library available for them to watch something else or read a different explanation or something like that. So they have the ability to do this. And so I think the other thing that happens is a lot of times people think, but don't you sometimes just need a teacher to come and help you with something?
Yeah, exactly.
And the answer is we have found not really. What we have found is that there's a lot of different resources available that help students learn better. And if you wonder if that's really true, I think our results are what speak to that. That our kids are able to be so successful academically because the technology is enabling them to learn the way that they need to learn and to get the knowledge they need. And most importantly, they're not beholden to raising their hand and waiting for a teacher to have time to come around and help them. I just read an article the other day that said the average amount of time that a teacher gets one-on-one with a student in the traditional school system in the US is about 22 seconds a day.
22 seconds.
22 seconds.
Wow.
So again, I think a lot of times people imagine this world where a teacher is going around and spending time walking through these math problems with a student. And unfortunately, that's just not what's often happening. Instead, students are sort of just thrown out to sea. And they're sitting in a classroom with a teacher explaining a concept, and if they don't understand it, there's no rewind. There's no ability to go back and say, "Hey, repeat that again," or "Let's learn it a different way." Whereas that is what our students are able to get in their learning experience in the mornings. If a student says, "You know what? I didn't quite catch that. Let me rewind. I got to rewatch this." They can rewatch it. Or I didn't understand the way it was said here. Let me watch a different way of teaching it and see if that helps me understand. And it really is providing that one-to-one tutoring experience that meets a kid where they need to go. That's one of the reasons we have kids who have learning differences who are able to do very well in our model, because let's say you take a kid who's dyslexic and needs extra time to be able to process and decipher, or they need the auditory support in addition to being able to read what they're doing. They have the time to be able to do that. And what we find is, again, when you give kids academic knowledge at the level and pace that's right for them, the sky's the limit.
Yeah. So, help me just to understand. Well, I love that. Wow, I think you're really, you are reinventing the school system, what we have today. What I want to understand. So the kids, they are in a classroom. They are in a classroom, and in those 2 hours, so there's a guide there, and they don't interact with each other. So they are just on their maybe tablet or a laptop, individually going through the exercises for 2 hours, right?
Yes.
That's what you say.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So the kids are sitting next to each other.
Yes.
In similar ages, right? You've got kids who are next to each other,
Yeah.
but they're each working on a computer
Yeah.
at their own pace. And during those 25 minutes of focused time, they're working on their own on doing that. And I think that's something that people often go, well, gosh, isn't that interaction important in a traditional classroom?
That's what I was...
But tell me, how much interaction really happens in a traditional classroom when most of the time you're told to look forward and pay attention to one person who's speaking and teaching? how much interaction is going on.
You're right. I think in that you teach in their working sessions, in their workshops. When there's the workshops, that's when they interact and they build those social skills and those team skills, leadership skills.
And they get the majority of the day to do that. Additionally, our students are also getting about 90 minutes a day of just unstructured outdoor playtime.
Yeah.
I was reading recently as well. It's something like 24 minutes of average recess time in a day in traditional schools. And kids need to have exercise. They need to have time to just play and hang out with each other. And so our kids are getting this 90 minutes of time like that each day. Plus all afternoon from 12:45 until 3:30. They're getting time in these workshops with each other. In the morning, we start every day with what we call a limitless launch, which is basically a time when the kids all come together and they do some sort of group challenge. Maybe it's that they have to take, paper blocks and try and figure out who can build the tallest tower, or they're doing some sort of an obstacle course challenge. It's something where our guides have a chance to introduce some sort of a growth mindset principle that brings together. So during the morning time when they're doing their 2 hours of core academics, in those 25-minute sessions, you are going to see, kids sitting on their computer doing their own thing. But here's what's really special about it. You can have two kids the exact same age, and you could see what they're working on in their computers. One 7-year-old boy might be doing algebra, while the other 7-year-old boy is working on his multiplication tables. And both kids are getting that level of engagement that they need. And they're not being sacrificed in terms of connection.
Yeah, so there are three things that I like about what you said. One is about the moment for them to learn academics. It's their one-on-one, and they have that safe space. They are learning there, not like there's a huge class and everyone, and talking, and like they have that safe place. Second that I love is that you can meet them where they are. So and that's the big issue that I find today in the system, is that kids, they have different speeds of learning. They are in different levels. So that is one. And the third, which I find more fascinating, is like you are already preparing them for what is the future that they are going to be handling, which is that the future is a relationship with technology, right? That's what I love about your model.
Yeah, one of the things that we teach, we think is a very important life skill, is public speaking and storytelling.
Yes.
And a lot of people find the idea of speaking in front of a group of people, the most scary thing they could ever do. And so how do you teach that skill in a way that is fun and interesting? And I'll give you an example of what we do, and we start this with our kindergarten and first grade students. Is they might be doing a show and tell, where they're going to give a 5-minute talk about their favorite thing, And what we do is we'll use an AI tool. There's something called Talk Me Up. There's another thing called Ori that can give them feedback on how they're doing. What's their intonation? How fast are they going? Are they speaking loud enough? And it's a really unintimidating way to get that feedback and that mechanism that eventually they're giving the talk in front of their classmates. And then pretty soon they're talking in front of a larger crowd. We had a really fun workshop this past year. It was called Public Speaking in the Wild. And our students were tasked with coming up with like a 6 to 8 minute talk about something they were passionate about. They use these AI tools at the beginning to help them present their stories better. Of course, they're getting writing skills, by writing and developing this story. Then they went to our local Humane Society animal shelter, and they gave their talks in front of the cats. And that's a pretty, they're a pretty reasonable audience. Cats can be tough, but they're not that tough when they're hearing this. So they did that. Then the students went to an assisted, that's so much fun. Now, the only problem with that was we had a lot of parents who called us afterwards who said, my child is now begging us to adopt one of the cats that was especially attentive as an audience member. And so a few of those parents kind of fell victim to the adoption of the cats. But then the students went to an assisted living living facility, and they gave their talk to the old folks that were living there. And actually, one of the skills that the students said they learned there was redirection, because sometimes the old people would like ask them some other question, you know, about something, and they did that. Then they eventually went to one of our local bookstores and gave a talk during kind of the open, you know, book reading. And eventually our students flew to New York City from Austin, Texas, and they went to an open mic night and gave their talks there. So you take a kid who at the beginning maybe is nervous about getting in front of a group of people and speaking, and you give them an AI tool to help develop their confidence and their capability, and eventually you have them speaking in front of a group of strangers in New York City. That's a pretty great example of how they can use it. But the other thing is, you know, the amount of AI tools that are coming out on a regular basis now that allow kids to vibe code and build things. And I also believe fundamentally that all people, and especially young people, they crave the idea of becoming builders and creators and contributors. In our traditional society, we make it so easy for them just to fall into consumer mode. And so that's why you see an epidemic of kids who are just doom scrolling TikTok all day or playing hour upon hour of video games. Instead, what we help our students do is figure out how they can become creators. So instead of, you know, sitting on TikTok all day, they can instead develop their own, you know, media channel that gives good advice to teenagers. Instead of playing video games, they can learn how to vibe code and build their own video game and do something. And that is the other thing that we want to help these young people understand. What can they put out into the world that is good and positive and helpful and builds others up? And there's so many opportunities, and kids have a lot of ideas about how to do that well. And we're providing them with the tools and the expertise around how to use these tools, the mentorship and the connection. And then the other thing is the culture that we've been able to create, where kids are cheering each other on to go do big things. That high standard, high support environment is really a magical place to be in.
Wow. Yeah, I love. So, what's your, what's your message for parents that might be a bit like, yes, I know that maybe this is not working, but that's the only thing I know, and also this is, I don't know if it's the best for my kid. The alternative education systems. Yeah,
I think fundamentally, what I want parents to understand is that it doesn't take more than 2 hours a day to educate your child. And once you realize that that is true, then it starts to make you wonder, why am I therefore making my kids sit through 6 hours? I am stealing their time from them when I do that. And I think that's the thing that once parents get over this idea that, wait, you can really learn better, you know, in this environment, and you can learn that much faster, and you can have time freed up to do all these other really fun things. And one of the things that we do when we go around the country and talk to parents that are looking at going to one of our schools, and they just aren't sure if they believe that, but they learn, they see the academic results, and then we have the student come and do what's called a shadow day at the school, where they get to try it. And in one day, these kids will come out and they're like, I want to go to this school. I'm excited about this school. And parents kind of go, what about your friends at your old school? And the kids are like, I got new friends here. Like, it's okay. And I think that's another thing that's important is so often I think parents hold on to the few bright spots that are in their kids' current school, which is their friends.
Exactly.
Maybe they love recess, or they love some, activity that they get to do after school. And what they start to understand is that kids are like, you know what? Not only do I get to continue being with those, or continue having those old friendships, but I make new friends at school, and I actually get a lot more time to interact with those friends. And I'm enjoying and I'm engaged throughout the whole day, versus just waiting for that 30-minute lunch break when I might get to sit and talk to my friends. And that's when they start seeing this. So if there was anything I could teach parents, it's that it doesn't take more than 2 hours to educate kids. Therefore, what is the answer for how you spend the rest of that time? We believe it's learning life skills, and that key to kids' happiness is holding high standards and providing the high support to help them go do big things.
Exactly. And one more that I would add is about embracing AI for their kids, because it's going to be their future.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think so many schools have, not risen to that challenge well. They've abandoned it, or they've ruled it out because unfortunately, AI in education, everybody thinks of chatbots in education, and chatbots in education are cheap bots. It's one of the reasons we don't have kids engage with chatbots during the academic period of the day, because most kids will use that to cheat. So our AI tool is really under the surface, providing those personalized lessons and then providing the coaching, not giving kids answers, right? What to do. And so that is a whole other part of it, is how are we creating these future-ready citizens who know how to use tools, learn new things, and help develop that. And those are skills that really can be well taught. We teach our students that ChatGPT is actually a terrible writer, but it can be a great feedback partner, right? And it can help you develop an idea. The student that I gave the example about, when she was creating her business plan, she was able to work with a guide and work with some AI tools to understand what is a business plan. She's 8 years old. She doesn't even know what a business plan is. But what is a business plan? Then put in her ideas and then get feedback on, here's how you could make it more clear. Here's how you can make this more compelling. Then she's using Canva to develop, a really compelling slide deck, and presentation. And then she's able to use an AI tool to give her feedback on her presentation skills. Those are all really great things that we need to be able to learn. And it's something that you and I probably in our daily lives, I'm constantly learning about things I can use better AI tools for in order to save me time and make a better product. And so we need our students to be learning those skills as well.
Yeah, my mission, what I'm passionate about, is like to help people do something bigger, And I know that the way they're going to do something bigger is that in the world is if we have strong education in the world. So now what my challenge to you is to help me to understand, like, not just alpha, but how do we accelerate the implementation of alternative education systems in the world.
Yeah, I think that parents need to demand more from their schools. I think they need to ask their schools, what are you doing to fix this? Instead of just saying, we're going to continue showing up to the same thing that hasn't changed in many years. One of the things we talk about at Alpha School is that when you come to the beginning of the year, back to school night, we don't dust off the same presentation that's been used every year to say, this is the standard, for the year, and these are the activities for the year. We're more like the Apple iPhone. We're updating every 6 weeks. We're constantly iterating, and we're constantly innovating. We're constantly looking at which apps could be better for things. How can we incorporate more learning science principles? How can we build better things? How can we improve our workshops? How can we make school even better? How can we make kids love school even more? What can our guides do to take it to the next level? And I think that parents should be asking for those same things. And I think parents also need to be willing to, put the work in themselves. Be at home with their kids and say, what? Let's play around with an AI tool to come up with a story where you get to be the child, in the adventure that's at your Lexile level. And let's read that story together. Let's do something. In fact, we have an app that's free to the public. It's called teachtales.com that allows people to do exactly that, cater stories to their kids' interests and provide it at the right reading level for them to make it interesting and fun to read, and help kids develop a love of reading from that. So parents need to not be scared of examining these tools and understanding that. And I think it's also important to really understand that this time in kids' lives is so valuable, and we shouldn't make them feel tortured. If I said to you, Rodrigo, you're going to spend the next 10 years in a job that you're not going to like, and it's not even really going to be super worthwhile for you, but you just need to be okay with that. You'd look at me like I was crazy, but that's what parents do to their kids. They say, this is just what it is. You're going to be okay with that. Enthusiasm, there's a researcher named Lee Jenkins who did a research study that measured enthusiasm over years. And can you guess what the highest year of enthusiasm levels was for a student?
And I don't know.
Kindergarten. Right? Kindergarten, it's high because every kid comes into school curious and excited. It goes down, 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 down until finally their junior year of high school when they're about 17 years old, and they finally start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then they're like, oh, I'm almost out. And why in the world should we let kids do this? And I think what happens is a lot of parents, what I've seen is a lot of parents say, well, yes, I understand my kid is down here, but at least they're down here with their friends. You know, at least they've got friends at the school that are also in this thing. And here's what I believe is enthusiasm should just be like this. And guess what? You can also be doing it with your friends. And so that's what I think parents should demand more. They should make changes. And the other thing that's been really cool about I think what I'm excited about with our model is that there are a lot of people who are saying, you know what, I've always wanted to open a school and provide these types of life value. I've always wanted to open a school and provide these types of life skills development, whatever it is that they're interested in. And I'll use the academic platform, the Time Back platform. So for example, we've got about 15 schools that opened in Texas that sports coaches in Texas have opened using our Time Back platform. And then they're doing whatever it is that they do in the afternoon. We've got one school that's doing martial arts, another that's baseball, another that's basketball. They're not affiliated with us other than that they're using our Time Back platform. And so I think it's allowing more entrepreneurs and more innovators and more experts to get into the game of school.
Yeah, so good. Well, we're coming to the end, and one last question for you. What is something bigger for you?
Oh boy, I feel like I have really bit off a lot. I will tell you, when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, I suddenly got this big, huge wave of feeling like I was not doing something I should be doing. Like I felt like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing and I'm not doing it. And I would talk to my husband and I'd talk to my best friend and I'd say, I think there's something I'm supposed to be doing. And they'd say, what are you talking about? You're a wife, you're pregnant, you have a job, you have a full life. And I'm like, there's something I'm supposed to be doing. And looking back now, which I always think is fun to look back on how life unravels, is I believe that when I got pregnant with that girl, that same girl who in second grade told me, I'm bored and we need something different, I think that was God's way of saying, there's something bigger that's going to come from this. And, again, what started as my, just side project to provide a different experience for my own kids is now something that I believe is going to impact billions of students around the world. And so I'm in the thousands right now, and I got to get to a lot more kids if we're really going to change education for everybody and truly open up and unlock human potential. Yeah. It's all about that. So I got a lot of work to do. Fortunately, I'm still pretty young, so I got another 20 years.
And you have full of energy, and I love your enthusiasm. I really loved our conversation, and I'm also very happy that that I brought this topic to our platform, because I really want to amplify, ways how we can unlock more human potential.
Thank you. I love that. Well, future of education, you can learn so much more about it and get inspired, and our students are just amazing, because guess what? Kids are awesome. So thank you.